Billionaires are undoubtedly masters of money. Not surprisingly, these few individuals concentrate a large part of global wealth. Some of them have built their fortunes through extremely valuable businesses that have transformed the lives of thousands or even millions of people. In addition to knowing how to multiply resources and profit greatly from it, millionaires also have access to detailed knowledge on how to protect the fortunes they have amassed, not only from internal or external factors, but also from the government, of course. Assisted by the best accountants, lawyers, and financial planners, billionaires have access to financial and tax information that literally makes them, the rich, even richer. This is because they legally manage to avoid taxes, many taxes, and not infrequently, mega entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Warren Buffett manage to pay less taxes than you and me, and sometimes, when it comes to income tax, even zero. Yes, zero. And it's not through any threat or shady dealings. It's through a strategy known as buy, borrow, and die. Through this strategy, the world's richest people manage to satisfy the craziest and most unlikely desires that money can buy, while at the same time avoiding paying taxes, something that would make any anarcho-capitalist proud. For example, between 2009 and 2012, Elon Musk paid not a single cent in income tax, and in 2018 he paid no federal tax. Similarly, Jeff Bezos achieved the same feat in 2017, as did Donald Trump and other billionaires in some years. But how do they achieve this? How is it possible to have $1 billion fortune and not pay taxes? This video is not meant to discuss whether this is right or wrong. We will focus solely on how billionaires manage to avoid taxes. This mainly occurs because the vast majority of governments, including the American government, focus tax collection on people's income rather than their assets. Therefore, billionaires do everything possible to avoid taxable income, such as salary, and instead invest in accumulating assets and other strategies that are far from taxation. In practice, they tell the world the following: if the government taxes income, that's fine. We don't have any income. Along these lines, it is common for some billionaires to have a salary of zero, even if they are advisors or executives of their own billion-dollar companies. Or, instead of a salary, they are remunerated with shares of companies in which they are partners or controllers. Moreover, they often include their personal expenses as expenses of another company or foundation they own, turning their personal expenses into expenses of a company, and the company, which has many expenses and little or no profit, pays fewer taxes. These strategies can be used in most jurisdictions around the world without major issues. Through this, the super rich start by buying assets such as real estate, stocks, and other long-term investments that make up their assets, which is the first element, the buy. These assets are subject to depreciation over time, and the expenses they generate over the years are used as a depreciation factor. Another factor is the depreciation of the asset itself, which is the loss of value over time, such as a car that tends to lose value year after year, or a property whose registered value is not updated over the years in the income tax return. Even though some of these assets may have a market price that appreciates over time, this higher price is only updated and reported on the income tax return if the owners want to sell their assets. And while these assets remain in the billionaire's portfolio, they proportionally lose value year after year. Therefore, in most cases, millionaires do not sell their assets directly. Either they keep them or use these assets as a bargaining chip to exchange them for other assets. This is because if they sell the asset, the transaction could be heavily taxed by the government, and they want to avoid that at all costs. Although this first point is interesting as a way to protect assets, it runs into another problem. Billionaires need money to buy what they desire, and this is where the second point comes in: borrowing money. As they avoid taxable income sources such as salaries and dividends, billionaires generally choose to borrow money from banks to buy the craziest toys, such as houses, yachts, supercars, and other indulgences, or even to buy other companies. Recently, Elon Musk borrowed money to buy Twitter. But why do billionaires take out loans, and why are loans extremely interesting to them? Borrowing money is an interesting way to have money on hand without having to give a portion to the government. This is because millionaires do not take any kind of loan. They fund themselves by giving their own assets as collateral, which can include real estate, cars, or even their own shares in the companies they own. Instead of simply borrowing from banks the amount they want and paying back the amount later plus high interest rates, they offer their assets as collateral to banks, and thus manage to borrow money at extremely low interest rates, as banks can take the pledged assets in case of non-payment. Even though this type of loan generates some cost with interest over time, the interest amount is much lower than what billionaires would pay in taxes if they carried out normal buying and selling operations or received a traditional source of income such as a high salary. To top it off, it is common for these loans to be rolled over several times into new financing with new guarantees and even long grace periods before starting payment. Not infrequently, they also indirectly exchange the loans for some of their own shares, directly, not characterizing a buying and selling operation, but simply because they fail to pay off the debt taken on, so the loan itself absorbs the shares given as collateral as a form of payment. That is, they have a lot of money on hand without having to pay taxes. Moreover, there are also cases where banks facilitate access to credit in exchange for preferences and facilities to carry out future operations for these billionaires' companies, such as participating in a future IPO or a fundraising operation in the financial market. In any case, regardless of the option chosen, billionaires stay off the government and tax authorities' radar. And if there are costs in this operation with banks, it is much lower than simply giving money to the government. That is, more money for them and less for the state. Before we continue with the video, I have a brief message. These videos take a lot of effort to produce, so if you're still watching, please leave a like to support our work. Consider subscribing and leave a comment below. Any comment helps. Now back to the video's topic. Finally, the last step, dying. One of the government's major sources of income is the tax paid by heirs. In some countries, the amount is substantially higher, reaching up to 50%. In the United States, for example, it ranges from 18% to 40%. In Portugal, the inheritance tax is 10%. But here is where billionaires' last strategy comes in to escape taxes, not only in their lifetime but also for their heirs. In addition to the aforementioned strategies, the money and assets that make up billionaires' fortunes are also protected by holdings, foundations, and other legal structures that pay lower taxes than an individual or only pay taxes when some asset from their portfolio is sold. Entities in which heirs become partners while billionaires are still alive, and with the death of the holder, heirs can receive shares, stocks, and assets. Usually the received assets have elements with a nominal value different from the real value, and generally this nominal value is much lower than the real value, presenting another bonus. In the United States, for example, this difference between the real and nominal value can be corrected through what is called the adjusted cost base. When they receive inherited assets, heirs can correct and update the value from the past to the present value. If they want to sell the asset, they can do so without having to pay capital gains taxes, since, accounting-wise, with the updated value, they did not make a profit in the operation. In other words, they can dispose of stocks and other assets without paying inheritance tax and capital gains tax. However, before having to worry about possible taxes, heirs often inherit a virtually negative wealth. This is because the debts made by billionaires are listed in the inventory, along with the assets to be received, and often the considered total value of the assets before the necessary updates is lower than the value of the debts to be paid. This happens because if the value of the assets is not properly updated over the decades, theoretically, it may be lower than the value of the debts. If the wealth is virtually negative, there is no tax to be paid. In other words, a billionaire can build an immense fortune, paying very few taxes, and still leave this wealth to future generations, which in turn pay few or no taxes on it. To complete the picture regarding bank debts, it is also common for billionaires to assume personal debts that are extinguished in case of the holder's death. That is, debts that do not pass on to the heirs. For this, they also take out insurance and other modalities that prevent the debt from passing on to their successors. And in cases where they do, successors can choose to pay off the debts or simply let them continue and perpetuate the game started by their predecessors. This way, the cycle of buy, borrow continues, and the rich get richer, while many poor individuals pay taxes on income and inheritance. Regardless of value judgments, this is the rule of the game. What's your opinion on all of this? Share it with us in the comments. Also, don't forget to watch the video where we talk about who the most powerful banker in the world is. See you in the next video. Do you know which business model offers high profit margins, immense scalability, and requires low initial investment? The startup market specializing in software development is the optimal choice to bring together all these advantages. However, the only place where you will truly find a highly scalable service that demands low investment is with Roadmap. Roadmap has global experience providing consulting and developing apps for startups in the United States, Europe, and Latin America, making it by far the best option for new entrepreneurs. If you want to venture into the premier market, contact Roadmap right away through the website www.roadmap.co/home or via email at contact@roadmap.co.